The power of a teacher's kindness. In a small town nestled between rolling hills, there was a school known for its dedicated teachers and eager students. Among the many children who attended this school was a boy named David. But David was not like the other students. He was a troubled child, often angry, disruptive, and unwilling to listen. His teachers had given up hope on him, believing that he was a lost cause. His peers avoided him, and he had no friends. David's anger and defiance were like a shield, keeping everyone at a distance. But there was one teacher, Mrs. Thompson, who saw something different in David. She had been a teacher for many years and had encountered many children with difficult behaviors, but there was something about David that tugged at her heart. She could see beyond his angry outbursts and defiant attitude. She saw a child who was hurting, a child who needed someone to believe in him. Mrs. Thompson decided that she would be that person. She made it her mission to reach David, no matter how challenging it might be. She began by observing him closely, trying to understand what made him act the way he did. She noticed that David often came to school with bruises and that he never brought lunch. She realized that his anger was not a result of being a bad child, but rather a child who was deeply hurt and neglected. One day, after yet another incident in class where David had thrown his books on the floor and shouted at his classmates, Mrs. Thompson asked him to stay behind. David braced himself for the usual scolding, but instead, Mrs. Thompson spoke to him gently. "David," she said softly, "I'm not angry with you. I just want to help you. Can we talk?" David looked at her with suspicion. No one had ever spoken to him with such kindness before. He didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. Mrs. Thompson didn't press him for answers. Instead, she talked about herself, sharing stories from her own childhood, and how she had faced challenges too. Slowly, David began to open up. He told her about his life at home, about how his father had left them, and how his mother struggled with addiction. He told her how he often went to bed hungry, and how he had to take care of his younger sister. As he spoke, tears filled his eyes. For the first time, someone was listening to him, really listening. Mrs. Thompson's heart broke as she listened to David's story. She realized that he had never had a chance to be a child, to feel safe, or to know what it was like to be loved unconditionally. She knew that she couldn't change his home life, but she could change how he felt at school. She could give him a place where he felt valued, where he felt safe. From that day on, Mrs. Thompson treated David with even more kindness and patience. She didn't just teach him math and reading, she taught him about life, about how to deal with his emotions, and about how to believe in himself. When David acted out, instead of punishing him, she would take him aside and talk to him calmly. She helped him channel his anger into creativity, encouraging him to draw, write, and express himself in positive ways. Slowly but surely, David began to change. His outbursts became less frequent, and he started to participate in class. He began to take pride in his work, and for the first time, he started to make friends. The other teachers noticed the change in David, and they too began to treat him differently. They followed Mrs. Thompson's lead, showing him kindness and understanding. Years passed, and David continued to grow under Mrs. Thompson's guidance. By the time he reached his final year of school, he was a completely different person. He was no longer the angry, disruptive child he had once been. He had become a kind, thoughtful, and hardworking young man. He excelled in his studies, and his artwork was displayed in the school's gallery. David had become a role model for other students, someone they looked up to and respected. When graduation day came, the entire school gathered to celebrate the achievements of the students. David was called to the stage to receive an award for his remarkable transformation and academic excellence. As he stood there, holding the award, he looked out at the audience and saw Mrs. Thompson smiling at him with tears in her eyes. He knew that he wouldn't be standing there without her. Overcome with emotion, David took the microphone and began to speak. "I wasn't always a good student," he said, his voice trembling. "There was a time when I was angry, lost, and felt like no one cared about me. But then I met someone who changed my life. Mrs. Thompson didn't just teach me about school subjects, she taught me about kindness, patience, and believing in myself. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She never gave up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself." The auditorium fell silent as David continued, tears streaming down his face. "Mrs. Thompson, you are the reason I am here today. You are the reason I have a future. I can never thank you enough for what you've done for me. You showed me that I am worth something, that I can be someone. You gave me hope when I had none. I owe everything to you." The entire room was moved to tears, and when David finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause. Mrs. Thompson's eyes were filled with tears of pride and joy. She knew that this was why she had become a teacher, to make a difference in the lives. Thank you.